Hey everybody, how's it going? I had a viewer request to basically explain what it would take to get started with chickens. And after all, this is what you're interested in, right? Let's start with the basics. Let's say you go out and buy some day-old chicks, some very, very tiny baby chicks. So you're gonna need to protect the new chicks. And I built this brooder just for raising chicks. And you can start smaller, but you gotta have nice weather protection if it's outside. You're going to have a hanging light for warmth. You gotta have bedding down. You gotta have a chick feeder that's smaller than the adult feeder. So you'd fill the mason jar with feed, and it's a special feed. And then the chicks start learning to peck out of here. You'll also need a waterer. So this is a big version of a waterer. This one holds 5 gallons, and basically the water trickles down here. The birds can obviously get their water. So let's go back outside and look at the brooder. Obviously, the chicks are going to need ventilation, but they also need really good protection from the elements. If you set them up in your garage or a shed, that's going to be a little better. But if you're just starting, you're going to have to build one of these. And you can look up the appropriate amount of space. But what I like to do is give them, you know, about a square foot per bird at 5 or 6 weeks of age. So I only raise maybe 10 or 12 chicks at a time. And when they get too big and it's too crowded, I move them out of here. You're also gonna need electricity, even if you just run a drop cord, and then you gotta have your light. The light has to be on a timer, and you can look up the timing, but basically you start with 24/7 amount of light, and you want a regular bulb that produces heat, not one of these compact fluorescents. And as the weeks go on, you start to bring it back to a 12-hour light dark cycle. So 12 hours light, 12 hours dark. So let's say you've already put all that money in, and now it's gonna be 5 to 6 months before they start laying their first egg. You've gotta feed them. So let's talk about feed. Okay, this is the layer feed. That is for laying hens that are grown up and laying eggs. You would buy chick starter feed, and that comes in crumbles. These are pellets. And basically my rough calculation is that each chicken eats about 1/4 pound of food per day. If you're gonna keep your chickens outside, then you're probably gonna want metal cans to store the feed in so that rodents don't chew into it. And you probably want another structure that's weather resistant. Okay, so let's do some math. 1/4 pound of food per day per chicken, and that's gonna vary depending on whether it's winter, summer, etc. But let's say every 4 days, one bird eats 1 pound of food. So a 50-pound bag of feed is going to last 50 times 4 is 200 days. So a 50-pound bag of feed is about $15. Do the math. But let's say 5 months goes by and they start laying eggs. You've already put all that money into this, right? And hopefully none of them died, none of them got sick. You also need total protection of the birds when they're grown up. Everybody I know, including me, who has raised chickens, and you let them out to run around because you think it's quaint, chickens have gotten killed. So let's look at my facilities a little better. And by the way, when you buy chicks, make sure you get females. I get what's called straight run, which means 50% are probably going to be males, 50% are females. You end up paying more for a sexed chick. That is, it's been determined to be guaranteed a girl. Okay, so let's say you're 5 months in, maybe the first egg is laid. You've already spent all that money, and once they start laying, they lay about 1 egg every other day. So if you wanted a dozen eggs a week, do the math, figure out that one bird's gonna lay about 3 eggs a week. So you're gonna need at least 4 chickens, okay? So that's 1 pound of food per day. You can buy a dozen eggs for a little more than $1, okay? Now, let's talk more about these facilities. Because I keep usually a dozen or so chickens at a time, I converted this old shed into a chicken coop. And obviously, you're gonna have the feeder, you're gonna have the waterer, you're going to have a little perch. You're gonna have nest boxes, which, you know, just that nest box, let me show you this. Just that nest box, which I built, was probably about $40 in materials. I would say the feeder is better part of $20. The waterer is another $20. You're gonna need bedding. Bedding is about $5 a bag, and you see that you have to change that out. at least a few times a year. And I don't want my chickens confined to darkness all the time, so there's a light in there on a timer. And then I made these outdoor runs so that they can come out and get some fresh air, and they can at least get a little sunlight. And again, I've got perches that I built in there. Notice the chicken wire, notice the structure. You know, I've got a lot of money invested in this, but I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I'm producing a lot more eggs than you're probably going to want to produce. All right, so some other considerations. A laying hen will lay eggs for about 2 to 3 years, and then she's going to stop producing, gradually taper off until she's not producing anything. At that point, did you get your money out of it? Now, also, what are you going to do? Keep her as a pet? What if she grows to 10 years old? You're going to be feeding her for another 7 years? So I kill the chickens and eat them, and this is my killing cone. So you put a chicken upside down in here, and then you pull its head out, and you cut the head right off with a knife. You don't want to do that if you're not serious about raising chickens, because you're going to just end up getting a surplus of old, non-laying hens. All right, here's another consideration. What are you going to do in winter? Now, the birds need at least 12 hours of light per day. And so I've got mine on a timer. And in winter, in order to keep them laying eggs, you want it definitely 12 hours of light in that chicken coop. Okay, a lot of people get chickens, they stop laying in winter, and they wonder why. It's because they shut down in winter, and what shuts them down is decreasing daylight. So you're gonna have to have a timer, a light, some type of reflective hood. Make sure that you have the correct amount of light. And when I worked in a poultry facility one time, years ago, commercial broiler production, 1,200 birds, they said if you can read a newspaper in the chicken coop, that's enough light. Now, you can measure light in lux and lumens and all these different things, but if you can read a newspaper in the chicken coop, that's enough light. A couple other thoughts. Do you have time for this? You got to check them at least once a day. I check mine twice a day. In winter, are you going to come out in the morning and break the ice or bring out hot water to basically get the ice off of their waterers? And again, you got to think about their comfort, so you may need supplemental heat. You may need a nice, solid, protected structure during windstorms, etc. Another aspect, if you travel, who's going to watch? Who's going to take care of the birds? Some other things to consider besides the noise. Can you handle a chicken getting hurt? You notice that one right there is getting plucked. So they pluck each other, sometimes to the point of blood. And what I do if they're bleeding is I pack the wound with flour, bread flour. The other thing is sometimes the hens, or if you have roosters, will eat the eggs. And that's called egg cannibalism. And once it starts, you have to kill them. They're going to keep eating eggs for the rest of their life. And so, with much of homestead endeavors, you have to question whether the cost, whether the effort is worth it. You're probably going to be better, financially speaking, to just buy food. You can buy from a local farmer's market, support local, hopefully organic production. For me, it's a lifestyle, and I eat off the land. And so this is a major part of my life. But is it right for you? I'm going to let you decide.